Hi everyone, and welcome to the last event in our Working with Couples 2016 conference. We're here with Mel Riley to talk about couples is to a crowd. I really like that title, Mel. Fab. It's lovely to have you back with
Thank
us.
you.
Yeah, you've had a busy day yourself.
Yeah, I have. I've had a full day today.
Yes, so you've been in practice all day and lots
I
going
have. I've
on,
had a
and
supervision and a couple of adults and a family and a little person. Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
so lots going on. It's great
Yeah.
to have you here with us at the end of the day to talk about how you think about working with couples, and
Yeah.
fantastic. A warm welcome to everyone who's joining us live on the site too. Mel, you can see the chat room.
I can. Yeah. I'm not very good at doing both. So I'll
Yes,
kind of rely on you to shout the questions out.
yes, yeah, absolutely. But if anybody's got some comments, some questions, or you just want to say hello to us, please jump in the chat room. Let us know. Of
Yeah.
course, it depends where you are in the world. It might be through the day, or maybe you're ending the day with us. You're not in the chat room and chilling out. Well, that's just fine. Mel and I and Sandra, really pleased to have you here.
Thank you.
Um, and of course, you might be joining us from the library too. So we won't be live, but we're really glad that you're paying some attention to the work that we're doing. Thank you. Um, Mel, can you give us just a little idea of the kind of things that you do in your practice? Would that be all right as we kind of
Yeah,
settle
I'm
in?
in private practice. Been in private practice nearly 10 years now. It's gone quickly.
Yes,
And
yeah.
I started very early in private practice because I realised that the only way to earn a living felt like to be in private practice.
Mm.
I was fed up of working for £5 an hour.
Right, okay, okay. So you could do a little better than
So
that
I
in
started off
private,
working
yeah.
with adults, said I would never work with children, and my clients got younger and realised that I there were clients that needed to be worked with, so I went off and did play therapy training and that changed my practice to be more playful and creative. Then after that, I went on to do my BACP accreditation at 2,000 hours, so I was a bit late to that party. I then went on to do supervision training. And then it was, well, I work with adults and I work with children. The next bit would be to pull that together to work with families, and then went on to train with systemic and family therapy. And of course, families kind of includes couples. So I was kind of getting used to working with combinations of more than one person in the room. The reason I chose the title, I was trying to think of a title that would engage, and but you know me, I don't like boring titles. So I was trying to think of a fun way to get people's curiosity. And the two as a crowd is because although there's two people in the room, there's often lots of people that input into a relationship. It might be children, it may be the wider context of parents or friends. So actually, there's often more than two people that appear in my therapy room, even though I've got a couple in my room. Yeah,
Oh, I like that title. I hadn't caught that, Mel,
yeah.
about your thinking. You're presented with a couple, but they're bringing their
Yeah,
parents, their friends, their children.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
often influence. You know, we don't live in a vacuum in isolation, do we? So when I'm working with a couple, there's, you know, I live in a high ethnic area as well, and so I work with a lot with Asian couples, and I notice in that culture there's a much closer family units, and so actually it can feel like there's 6 or 7 people in that relationship that are all kind of quite kind of invested in it. So yeah, how does a couple carve any time space out for themselves amongst meeting kind of mum and dad's needs, or older siblings needs, or even children's needs? Yeah.
So when you've got generations in the
Yeah.
household, you've got a large family. There's
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not just thinking about the clients in front of you. Yeah.
Yeah, and the picture can be, I think I started with person centered roots. So there's the what's happening in the here and now, but the here and now I think is very much driven sometimes by what's gone past, so history. I'm going to throw some theory out. Boscolo and Bertrand, who've written lots of stuff on systemic and family therapy, have a lovely kind of technique or tool that they call the reflexive loop of time. So it's kind of like a figure of eight on its side. And actually, what they say is that the past influences the present, and the present influences the future. And so we're kind of, it's a recursive loop of going backwards and forwards. And I find myself doing that whether I'm working with a family or individual. So what's happening in the here and now, and what's driving that? Yeah. And so actually, also in the systemic theory, we talk about dominant stories. So if a couple are really intent on staying together, but it's not working, why is that? And sometimes there may be a dominant story. So if we kind of go back a little bit into, what was modeled to them in relationships. And so I might hear a story that I didn't have my dad around, so I must stay around for my child. So the dominant stories that that drive some of the behaviours or things we're seeing playing out in the here and now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it also gives me a sense that you don't have an objective with a couple, that they've come to you for therapy, they must stay together.
Yeah, absolutely. I've helped couples separate, and actually it's turned into family therapy because there's a how do we tell the kids. So it can work in many different combinations. So yes, some couples may not stay together. That's not for me to decide, that's to them. I'm interested in how they fit together.
I noticed that in your blurb. Yeah. I really like that expression.
Yeah.
Could you say a bit more about what you mean by that? How couples fit together? Yeah.
I think we fit. Why do we get together? It's often through attachments, our need for love and connection. We're human. We're born for attachments and connections, and we're happier when we feel loved, desired, and wanted. So actually, people get together because they want to be desired, wanted, and loved. But actually, what then plays out, and actually, I've been in preparation for this, I was kind of thinking, to get my thoughts, I kind of had a look at a couple of TED Talks. And interestingly, I think it's Esther Perel says this, there's three types of love. There's a lust, romantic love, and then a deep connection or attachment. And the reason that sometimes affairs happen or people end up in multiple relationships is that some of those needs might be met in one relationship, but it doesn't stop. You might have a deep attachment to somebody, but lust might be somewhere else. So it's more complicated than just sometimes that one person, one relationship. So she says that she believes that we can love more than one person. So I don't know about that, but
Okay.
I think maybe there's different types of love. We love our children. So there's romantic love and there's other types of love. But our attachment styles, I think, are really interesting. And what I notice is a couple I'm working with at the moment is one of them has a very avoidant attachment style through his history. Has been at boarding school. There's been some trauma and neglect in his early emotional life. And so he has a real need for attachment, but also a real avoidance of being hurt again. And his partner has kind of said he's cheated several times, but I love him, I want to stay with him. So she has a need for attachment too. But actually in trying to get her needs, she kind of demands what she wants from him, and actually because he can't meet those needs and doesn't know how from his history, then actually she's kind of chasing him around and he backs off. So you can get this interplay of, as I try and get closer to you, you get further away. And somehow bringing that, if you can kind of spot the attachment styles or make sense of what's happening and feed that back as a possible hypothesis to be picked up, or say, somebody might say, no, that's not how it is. But we can kind of make sense of what's driving some of the behaviours, and actually looking at beyond the behaviours is what's the need that's not being met, what's the emotion that drives the behaviour. And a very poignant moment in a therapy session was when a client, when a wife says to me, I just want him to be kind to me. It doesn't cost much, does it? And I was about to say, no, it doesn't. It doesn't cost a lot. And then a little penny dropped, maybe from my own history, my use of self, that says, actually, maybe it costs everything. And I said, maybe it costs everything, because to be kind is to be vulnerable, to really put yourself out there to be loved. And if you put yourself out there to be vulnerable and loved, you also put yourself up there and risk being hurt. So actually, maybe for him to really connect and be kind and to be emotionally connected, bearing in mind his history, maybe it costs everything.
That's a real moment, Mel. A real moment. Yeah.
And how do I know that? Because I'm full of emotion as I'm saying it.
Yes, I can see
I'm a
that.
traumatized child that was neglected and abandoned emotionally. So I know how much we can push people away, and not allow ourselves to be loved through our histories.
Yeah.
And sometimes clients tell me that they don't feel loved, and it may be that they are loved but they don't feel it, or that a partner doesn't know how to show it. So I hear a client saying, no, he buys me big things, but actually I don't feel loved. And actually, do we need our emotions to be heard, to be loved, to feel loved? Yeah.
Such a good question, and I'm just really caught by what you're saying about like the vulnerability that we need to be in relationship, to bring some kindness to each other, can cost us a lot, I guess, depending on where we've come from.
Absolutely. And hearing a wife's kind of moan about her husband, and then actually when the penny drops that, my God, I've not actually let him in.
Like something about how we co-create what's going on in the relationship, or that might be what's happening.
And the systemic theory says that we can, they call it social graces, so we can look at how gender plays out, how our socioeconomic history plays out. Do we have different attitudes to money, to risk, to finances, to even parenting styles? So what's causing the discourse? Often, it drills down to somebody doesn't feel loved, or their emotional needs aren't being met, and maybe neither of them are being met, and they're both running around either avoiding each other, or one's trying to there's an interplay going on where they can't come together. Another couple tells me that they can't, I'm not allowed to cool down. I get angry and I'm not allowed to cool down. He needs to resolve it there and then, and I need to calm down. And actually, when we unpick that a bit, maybe the reason she's not given the time to calm down is he can't manage his distress of the separation. That you're upset with me and I need to put it right.
Yeah, but one partner actually needs time just to let their temperature come down a little bit.
Yeah, but actually,
if the other
person can't manage their distress, then they chase after and don't allow the time to calm down.
Yeah.
So if people can kind of understand what the emotion is under the behaviour, then actually it might be, there's a sense of really hearing the emotion, but also maybe being directive and offering a solution that might help for that. So it might be about, can you reassure the person that I'm upset, but but I'll be back shortly, that it's not over, I'm coming back, give me half an hour. Can you, if you can manage that that kind of anxiety and distress, can you then go and have your time? Yeah.
Right, so if both partners have some understanding of their own process.
I see it with mums and kids as well. He won't leave me alone. I've told him off, and now I'm cross, and I'm gone to my room, and he's banging on the door. Child can't manage the distress because actually I need my parents. Or maybe a partner can't manage the distress because actually sometimes when we upset people, we get distressed because we've upset someone. So we need to put it right. Yeah. Yeah.
and to then be able to have some kind of negotiation or like
Yeah.
explicit conversation about how to manage that. Or
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I've written down thinking what are the patterns and themes, and one of them is mind reading.
okay,
They should just know what I need and want.
mm,
Why? They're not you.
yeah,
Yeah. They don't live inside your head.
mm,
And actually, well, he should just know when I'm upset what to do. Actually, you're making a really big assumption that when he was upset or she was upset, that somebody stepped in to take care of and knows how to soothe and what to do. For some people, that doesn't exist.
mm,
So when you get distressed, I get distressed too, and I don't know what to do. So I'm overwhelmed with your distress and my own distress.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's no theory of mind, if you like. There's no
Yeah.
way to kind of imagine how the other person is because
Yeah.
I'm just so flooded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I call it the what about me. If someone's what about me is too big, then you can't hear somebody else's what about me.
Mm,
Yeah. So maybe the therapist's job is to hear the what about me's from both parties and then feed that back to them so that they both hear each other's what about me. There's something very telling about when if you can hear the stories and get to the emotion that partners can see their partners in new light. So maybe they only see the angry bit of their partner, but they don't get to see the vulnerable bits. And so actually the vulnerable bits can change how somebody sees someone. So he's not just angry, actually. There's maybe there's a person here that's actually hurting. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, that's something the therapist can be helpful with, I guess, to
Yeah. Yeah.
notice those things, and
Yeah.
like that vulnerability to have it
Yeah.
heard by the therapist,
Yeah.
because maybe each other in the couple can't make space
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other ones is I call them shame landmines.
Yeah. So what's a shame landmine?
You won't see it, but you'll know when you've stood on one or
Ah,
you've wandered into one. So
okay.
it may be is there anything, what's for tea? And when your partner, rips your head off, you kind of know that actually this is Brené Brown's work. What's the story that's been made up? So, if I'm busy on the laptop and husband comes in and starts chattering and I kind of, is there anything for tea? Well, the story I've made up is that, oh God, I'm a bit of a shit wife here. I haven't cooked any tea. You were expecting your tea on the table. And actually, no, the reality is the person that's just walked in is just hungry.
They're just wondering what's in the fridge.
Yeah.
It's
So
not about
actually,
you must have cooked me dinner.
yeah,
Right, okay.
the partner that says, I'm struggling for an example, but they say something, and actually the story we make up triggers our shame. So maybe we feel told off. Maybe it triggers a defense mechanism, so the partner blows up. So if your partner's blowing up, you've quite possibly hit a shame landmine. And so rather than attack back, what you can do is kind of ask. I get clients to say, what's the story you're making up? What's going on here? Promoting some curiosity rather than spitting back just because you've been spat at. Yeah, so there's a sense of hold the stone that's been thrown at you.
Yeah, well,
Wonder
because it could be
why
so easy to just throw it straight back,
wonder
can't it?
why it was
Yeah.
thrown, and put it down.
And so, as therapist, are you kind of modelling that a little bit, or
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think it's about, I often use examples from my own history about, when there's a story I've made up that probably doesn't fit. And being able to, even if you can't deconstruct it at the time, to go back and when things are calmer and say, what happened there? Yeah, what happened there? What did we do? So it doesn't matter if you didn't get it right, but can you repair it?
yeah. So it's not about always getting it right,
No,
diffusing the situations, but can we
no.
go back and do
Yeah.
something? Yeah.
And what I realise is maybe I'm teaching our clients therapy skills.
Mm. Okay.
sometimes. Yeah.
What do you mean by that, Mel?
Well,
What's
curiosity, systemic theory is about, curiosity, about asking circular questions. So we can take some of the skills that we use in our therapy sessions and hand them over to our clients. So, for instance, I'm very aware of hitting shame landmines and mind reading. So I can offer questions in a more tentative way rather than an accusing way. So I think as therapists may have a knack of weaving through the defences to get to information that's useful, but we'll do it in a way that is I'm wondering or I'm noticing. So it's a very different language to the you didn't put your shoes in you didn't put your shoes away, which will is a recipe for a fight.
yeah?
Rather than I'm wondering why your shoes are in the floor. Were you in a hurry? Did you not get time to put them away? I almost fell over them. Which is still a communication that your shoes are in the way, but it's a request. Can you put them away next time because I fell over them, rather than a shame question that says you didn't put the shoes away, which will then you'll end up with an attack back. So it's probably written down somewhere in the literature, but I call it I language. So I would really appreciate it if you could put your shoes away because I keep falling over them. Yeah. So we can request respectfully rather than demand out of desperation, and so those people hear the emotion and the request, but if people tune out when it becomes a nagging conversation, so changing the communication to something more respectful. Yeah.
That makes so much sense because a lot of the language we're developing as therapists, of course, we're working in a clinical setting, even in private practice, but it's about talking in a way that I guess is
Yeah.
helpful, like it's communication
Yeah.
skills that.
I'm just noticing the chat room.
Okay,
Shona's just
yeah,
said she's worked with individuals whose partners blow up so often that, yeah, it's anxiety provoking. And actually, so to kind of bring that into the room and work out, maybe somebody doesn't regulate very well, and so they're flipping into fight, flight, survival mode. They're going to need a lot of safety before they're going to be able to settle that kind of anxious brain down, and understanding what triggers the anger. I'm just reading a book at the moment, Shona, that might be interesting to you. It's very new. It's only just come out, I think, and it's called What Makes. Oh God, what's it called? It's upstairs. I think it's called What Makes Us Flip. And it talks about life morts, the triggers that will get people to flip in 50 millionth of a second because the brain can react that quickly. Yeah. So yeah, you're right.
That's quick, isn't it? That is quick. Yeah.
Yeah, she's right. The children are damn if they're living in that kind of volatile household. You're creating, I call them meerkats because I've trained with Jane Evans, meerkat or anxious volatile brain. So there's a real incentive for both partners to work at bringing that volatility down so that the children have a better, and it's not good for anybody if you're living with that level of anxiety. It may be looking at history as well as to, is that a traumatized person that is being triggered constantly? Yeah. And it may be that some one-to-one work is needed with a partner that has some needs that are huge because of history. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would do that when you're working with a couple. You might work
Yeah,
with the partners.
I sometimes split couples up. When I first started working with couples, I had some kind of quite rigid rules because I was quite new at it. So it's like couples must come together. I won't see couples if they don't start together. That's all gone out the window now because actually life is not that neat and tidy.
Mm-hmm.
And actually what I'm noticing is because of my systemic training is it doesn't matter who starts first. When I work with individuals, I was so absorbed in that individual story that I maybe wouldn't be so respectful to the partner, the absent partner. So yeah, it's a bit of a twat, isn't it? Sorry guys, I swear a lot. But actually now, having a more systemic approach and realizing why people do, there's always reasons for why people do what they do. I kind of hear the story, but I also get curious about what might be going on with the partner, and so that can be quite useful for them to take back. And one partner actually took it back and said, and the partner actually said, "My God, she's a mind reader. How did she get all that from our conversation?" And using my own history and some of the theory, and that partner then came to join us for some sessions because actually he had a sense of he'd been heard even though he wasn't even in the room. So that somebody said about the neutrality, the systemic teaching trains you to kind of to be able to see things from different perspectives and different angles, and sometimes you may find yourself leaning towards one person more than the other, and for me that's the time to get curious and say, I'm really drawn to that story and it's pulling me in. I'm wondering what's going on for you, so that at the person I'm not so drawn to, and owning if I feel that I'm kind of drawn and losing some neutrality. And then there's times where I'll say, well, I get that, but I'm also hearing that as well. So keeping both people in the loop all the time, and people do arrive. One person arrives, and then the other part of the couple arrives later on, and that yes, they're arriving late to the party, but I actually bring that into the room. So when somebody says to me, I've come for a few sessions, but I realise it'd be better if we were both here, then I will say, yeah, talk to your partner. Let them know, and often they've reported back that I like her, I feel quite safe with her, she understood me, I think she'll get you too. And so there's a safety for one person to come because things are struggling, and maybe the less reluctant partner has some safety because their partner's been and checked it out first, and then another partner may arrive. I often split couples up too to give them their own voice, because there may be things that they, I've had couples who've been together 15, 20 years and have never ever disclosed some of their histories. And so you've got a client that's a couple that are working blind, not knowing what someone is managing. And I had a wife say to me, I don't get it. I'm really kind to him, but he just won't talk to me. And I said, yeah, and the more you press, the less likely he is to talk, because he needs a high level of safety. But I'm really kind. And I have to kind of point out that just because, if you've been brought up in a home where you don't have a voice because it's scary and you've learnt to be quiet and shut up, what happens is, just because you get into a bigger body as an adult, it doesn't mean you suddenly can find your voice and you suddenly grow a load of bravery and confidence to find your voice. You can still feel quite, the anxiety may rob you of your words, and I know that's been an issue for me in my earlier relationships, which is why I know it exists. And one of the tools to get around that is really, really simple. I worked out that if I didn't communicate with my partner, then he had no clue what was going on. But I couldn't get the words out. I'd lived in a volatile household where I couldn't speak up. So it was all in there, but it wouldn't come out through my mouth.
Yeah.
So actually I learnt to write what I call rage on the page. I used to rage on the page. So what I would do is I would scribble it on a piece of paper. I would chuck it under the door and run.
Under the door so your partner could read it.
Yeah, and then I'd kind of take off. But actually he'd be able to read it, and I could put my vulnerability in there, and I could put my anger in there, and everything I needed to in there, because he wasn't there. And then what he was then able to do was kind of, when I came back, he was able to say, okay, I read your letter, I get it, I understand. Now let's talk about it. So I invite clients, if they can't get it out through anxiety or fear because they haven't reached that level of safety, which can take years to build, then there are other ways to communicate other than than face to face, and it slows it down. I often get couples to write to each other because it allows somebody. There's a different type of hearing, I think, that goes on when you've got something and you don't have to respond. you can hear it. The systemic reflective teams often do reflective. They often have groups of family therapists in the kind of the Milan approach, and so they may talk about a family or a couple so that the couple can hear what's being said about them. So reflecting out loud also offers a different way to hear the story, that they don't feel they have to respond to. They can hear it, think about it, and then decide what they make of it, and a letter helps that to happen.
Fascinating, yes. So thinking about different ways to have that communication in a way that can slow things down a bit and that is actually manageable and possible for the clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Shona says when you do find your voice, it destabilizes the couple. It changes the dance. The dance moves change, and people have to keep up. The danger if one couple's in therapy and the other isn't is that somebody gets left behind, and somebody's development is going on at a different rate. But you're always having to manage the different dynamics. That if somebody finds their voice and suddenly starts to assert themselves, then what happens to that interplay? If you've got somebody who's in a childlike and someone is an adult, and then somebody grows up and becomes adult, then actually is the other adult needed anymore? That those dynamics have to be addressed constantly, and the partner has to be helped to keep up.
Yes, because I guess the partner who's used to feeling like they're in charge has their own vulnerabilities too as things start to move around.
And interestingly, sometimes if somebody's putting up and shutting up, which is another theme I noticed, because we can't find our voice, then the other person actually may kind of wrongly translate that person doesn't care.
So that's a story they might make up that isn't true.
That you're not present enough. And I can remember one guy saying, well, I was out every night because she never moaned, she complained about it, didn't think she was bothered. There was no communication to say I miss you and I need you here. Or if it was done in a blame shame, like, you're out every night, where are you?
But that silence, I guess, he was making up a story in the vacuum. Or,
that I'm not missed, and it doesn't matter whether I'm there. So,
I notice as well, Mel, in your blurb, you say systemic approach. Well, you say playful systemic approach. And I know we've talked before about, where play and creativity is. Could you say a little bit about where that might be when you're working with couples?
If you ever read Stuart Brown's book on play, he says that couples need creativity and they need newness in their relationship in order to survive, so it doesn't become stale and dead. So actually, how do couples spend time together? Do they play separately or do they play together? And play can be anything, and it's also a state of mind. So how much care do they take of each other to meet their own needs, and how much care and what do they do together? If all your communications are about about the kids, or about if it's all problem talk, where's the time off? Where's the time to laugh together? Where's the time to kind of fool around and skip around? Or how do you get playful if you're kind of bogged down all the time in and just like kids avoid parents in their bedrooms because it's too conflict and there's too many arguments, couples can avoid because there's too much conflict and there's not enough good time.
So would you make suggestions around maybe scheduling some time?
I would ask what they like to do. Often when couples get together, they stop doing stuff. The intense pull to be together means that they may neglect maybe they love their partner and lose sight of themselves in that process. So actually, I don't know if you can see this, but you have two people here, and actually maybe in a healthy relationship there's a little Venn overlap that you spend time together, but also retaining these bits here, retaining a sense of self. So to keep a healthy relationship, what can happen with attachment styles is that they tend to they can be on top of one another. And that can be either one person may like that, but the other may find it a bit suffocating.
Yeah. So
So
then there's no space where there isn't an overlap.
no,
And when
and
we're,
actually, in
yeah.
a relationship, does it need to be equal? Do we have to have equalness of power? Do we also need to have a kind of a life outside of the relationship? Because if you're kind of hanging all your coat hooks on one person, how do you expect them to fill all of your needs? Yeah. And do we have to also kind of look at whether somebody fills enough of their own needs? Is it somebody else's job to make us happy, or is it our own? Can they contribute to it? But if we hand over that job entirely to that other person, then have we missed something? Yeah.
So you'd
Yeah.
be watching that as well in the,
Yeah,
or watching for that in the
I'd
couple.
be
Yeah.
exploring that quite explicitly about how they take care of themselves, and who's pulling the weight in the relationship, and does somebody feel that somebody isn't pulling their weight, whether it's practically, whether it's emotionally, whether it's financially, and getting them to kind of ask for their needs to be met in a good way. I remember working with one couple, and it was the simplest of things, but it seemed to make such a massive difference that one of them wasn't particularly emotionally available and didn't really know what to do, and so kind of knew something was wrong, and the partner couldn't say what was wrong, but there was just a big knowing that something was wrong. And just kind of giving them some tools of what can you do when you know something's wrong but you don't know what, and are you so terrified of getting it right or wrong that you do nothing and you're paralyzed, so you don't step in to support. And so we came up with the word wobbly. Couldn't
Okay.
quite They couldn't quite work out whether someone was mad, sad, happy, or hurting. So actually, the word wobbly was used a lot. You look like you're feeling a bit wobbly. Would you like a hug? Yeah. And for somebody who wouldn't allow touch, was really not very good with touch. My couple sit together, so actually I said, how would it be to hold hands? And they just held hands for a little while. I was just very quiet, and actually just watching them join together their hands, there something connected them. And actually what they both said to me was that they hadn't found a way to reach each other through words, but actually when things got wobbly, they wouldn't say anything. They would just literally hold hands, and both felt supported and connected by that togetherness. That was a kind of an interim measure until they could find some words. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sounds so helpful when the words are not doing it, I guess. It's
Yeah.
not, there isn't a way
Yeah.
through the words.
And that was the silent communication, that we're here and we're in this together, that didn't need any words, but actually it maybe sometimes action speaks louder than words. Yeah.
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 Sounds like that was so helpful for that couple,
Yeah.
and like for you just to be quiet for that time, I guess.
Yeah, and
let
that's,
them.
I guess that's the playful and the creative is not necessarily about, it might be about toys, it might be about going to the park and playing in the swings, or getting some board games in, or playing Jenga, or whatever. But sometimes it's about being playfully creative and saying, could we try this? Would this work? And actually, there's a sense of these clients. I had a feeling of, they were sat right next to each other, but I've gone off the screen, but they were right next to each other, but emotionally they were very, very apart. And so we know through touch that we can feel supported. So actually, just to get them to hold hands. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so useful to be reminded of, Mel, that therapy is so much about talking, and communication's essential in a relationship. How can we keep talking or talk more? But sometimes it's not that.
No. And there's something about, if you can get a partner to come in and hear somebody's distress with just a hug, or it might be a kind of a rub on the back or a squeeze of an arm that says, I'm here, I'm with you. Yeah, I don't know all that you're feeling or be able to put that into words, but I can step in and be here with you. Keeps the couple connected and together. I guess we should talk about intimacy. It can be, some therapists may be a bit frightened to talk about it, but are couples still intimate? Do they have a sex life? Are they intimate? Intimacy can mean a hug, holding hands, being close, or it can mean sex. But actually, has that been lost? And what does that mean to couples? Is there a mismatched sex drive? What's getting in the way? Is it anxiety? Is it too busy? They're too busy, or is it actually a wall of anger?
Yeah. So what is it? And like, it'd be important. You would be talking to couples about that. You'd be
Yeah,
asking them.
I've got written down here. It was in a TED talk. Anger is not an aphrodisiac.
Right. That seems obvious, but when you say it,
Yeah,
yeah,
and rejection hurts. Yeah. So if somebody is if you've got a mismatched sex drive and one person wants sex and the other doesn't, then do they stop initiating? But are they sitting with a lot of hurt and anger and rejection feelings that aren't being voiced? Yeah. Yeah.
So the couples counselling relationship, that's a place where the partners could talk about that.
Yeah, and whether the intimacy can be found again or whether it's not going to be found again. If it's not going to be found again, then I think that's really worrying. Yeah.
Yeah, like worrying in terms of the future of the
Yeah.
relationship.
How do you keep a relationship if you don't have intimacy? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, shagging like bunnies, excuse my crudeness.
Yes, okay.
But it needs, if people don't, it might be once a month or once a fortnight, but if there's no intimacy and there's no communications or closeness that says that we desire each other, do we all need to be, we need to be desirable. It might not be hot passion desirable, but desirable as in you still want me. Yeah.
Like that's important to have in order to sustain the relationship.
Yeah. And it can often lead down the route of, is somebody got issues that are much deeper in terms of self-esteem, that they no longer feel sexy because they put on weight, or they've got busy with the kids and lost sense of themselves. So all of that's part of the story.
Yeah. But important for the couples therapist to be asking those questions.
Get curious and to kind of widen the picture out of, what from the past is playing out, but what also isn't happening now that you'd want to be happening. Yeah. And actually, how do you make sense of it? Well, somebody makes sense of it that they don't, that they're no longer desirable, that my partner doesn't find me attractive anymore. Actually, it's quite often when you hear the other party kind of say, well, that's not how it is. I'm tired all the time, and I'm fed up, and we've got no money, and so actually it's about we never go anywhere. So actually there can be lots of red herrings that stories people have made up that aren't true.
Yeah, so we might take that story and think, oh, my partner doesn't fancy me anymore, doesn't want me, but it could be about lots of other things, I guess. Yeah.
So it's about improving communications to more respectful, and also how do we get our needs met. I own up to this one in past relationships, is that maybe we get our needs met by poking or prodding someone. Do we create more drama to get our needs met in a kind of unhealthier way? So maybe we've just had enough. We're feeling a bit pissed off that somebody's been out a few late nights. I've got to empty the dishwasher and empty the washing machine because you're out again and this is your second night out. Actually, rather than own that and say I'm feeling a little bit neglected here and I feel like that you're not pulling your weight, do we come home and say, have you had a good time, hon? And get a bit, dare I say, psycho. Do we poke in order to get a response? But actually the response we get is actually because we've attacked, because we've thrown the stones get thrown back and you end up in a row that doesn't really resolve anything. So actually getting people to own when they feel wobbly, whether they feel a bit neglected or unheard, so that things can get resolved in a healthier way. So how people argue,
Yeah.
how they resolve it is really interesting. I think I said it. People tell me that they don't have different arguments; they have the same one over and over and over again, and it doesn't get resolved because I'm right and he's right, and therefore we just clash, and so it's co-constructing a new story, and sometimes it's both are right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like that
both are
can be
right
hard
because
for.
that's how they both experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be hard for us to think about. Like, two
yeah,
different points of view, but both are
yeah,
true and genuine
yeah,
experiences. And yeah.
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 So actually, both of you are right, but actually, where's the middle ground, or is there something that we've missed in the need for both of you to be right? Yeah, yeah. There's two what about me's that have got very big here, and actually, let's attend to those.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We've kind of gone back to that "what about me?"
Yeah,
That,
yeah,
yeah, and that place we can get into where we feel very sorry for ourselves and we can't hear anyone else. It's
yeah,
just,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, all history hasn't helped us because actually the what about me's come from way, way back. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Like it's not about what's going on right now. It might be
Yeah,
like,
I've had partners say, "Well, it doesn't matter how much I reassure her, it still doesn't work." And actually, that's a sense of you can tell her, but she can't feel it. Yeah, yeah. Maybe the deficit isn't from him; it's from yeah. And are we responding to what's happening now, or are we responding to what happened previously?
yeah.
Is this new stuff or is this old stuff?
So the partner's getting a sense of that, maybe being able to understand each
Yeah,
other's kind of psychological makeup,
yeah. But
and
if you don't know what's gone on before, how do you know what your partner's responding to? Yeah. So I had to own my history and using myself an example and say that I can't find my voice when I get really angry. I get really upset, and it all gets all mixed up, and then I get really anxious, and I just want to run and hide. But actually, where does that come from? That comes from history. It's not about you.
yeah,
None of this is about you, and that's what I have to say to partners a lot of the time. It's really horrible to say, so it has to be. We
yeah,
call it warming the context in systemic therapy. You're not going to like this, but this is not about you. This is so about what your partner has experienced previously.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that, warming the context.
yeah. Warming the context. Yeah.
You're not going to like this, but
Yeah, and I'm always checking out. This is another term from systemic theory, relational reflexivity. I'm always checking out about neutrality. Is anybody here feeling picked on and that I missed something? How am I doing? Because I'd rather not guess. I'd rather ask and hope that they can let me know that. Well, yeah, I feel really picked on because she said this, but you haven't asked her about that. So we can address that, and I can hopefully try and stay somewhere in the middle. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense. And it can be so easy to forget that as therapists. We can just ask our clients, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah,
yeah. But why do we think we have to guess it all rather
I
than just
know.
ask? Sometimes clients won't tell you because they
Well,
can't.
that's true. That's true.
But often, if they're invited to, and we're kind of robust enough to say, you can say anything here, and we'll try and work it through because that's what life's about. Then they can say, well, actually, Mel, we've been talking about this for ages, but I really wanted to talk about that. What isn't being said is just as important as what is, and I'm always looking for what isn't said. Looking for the missing pieces of the puzzle, because actually, I can work with a client for weeks, and I'm thinking about more individual work for this example. But there's lots of talk about mum, but actually, where's dad? Where's dad? Hasn't even been mentioned, or yeah. So reading between the lines is, I think, our job.
Yeah, yeah. So what isn't said
What isn't being
is
said?
as important. Yeah,
What's being felt but maybe not said?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm really caught by what you're saying about like we can often be narcissistic, thinking this everything in the relationship is about us.
yeah. That's often our what about me. That's just
Yeah,
I use that so much with individuals, kids. We have to own when our what about me has got too big and go, am I being? The problem is with relationships. There's no there's no kind of clear middle ground. So, are we demanding too much or not enough? And if your history and you haven't had great kind of role models or relationships, kind of I call them the templates. Some people call them schemas, I think. It's my language. I made it up. But the template that we're given, then actually we don't know sometimes whether we're demanding too much or too little.
Yeah.
And I say to clients, I give them the relational reflexivity tool. I don't do these relationships very well, so if you feel I'm demanding too much, then you have to let me know. And there's times where I'll demand too little. So, and so you can step in and say, you're not letting me help you here.
Yeah. And like these kind of conversations we often don't learn growing up, like even if things haven't been that traumatic in the house.
Yeah.
So for couples to learn that kind of language and to learn to be able to be really explicit with each other about what's going on.
And I think people also kind of, I get some high flyers in my therapy room, and they'll say, but, he's a GP, or he's a police sergeant, or he's a head teacher, or she's a head teacher. They should know this. And I have to say to them, the rules of a job are job descriptive. There's a clear set of black and white. You turn up, you do 7 hours, you teach the kids, you go home, you do your paperwork. In relationships, there aren't any rules. You have to kind of navigate. It's like working without a map. And so actually, for some people, if they haven't had a good template or a good model to them, then they really struggle to be too. They worry about being too much, and they end up asking for nothing. And I recognise that from my own history, and I think we get all into labels of a borderline personality disorder, and I just wonder sometimes, are they human struggles of not knowing what's enough and what's too much? Yeah. And bouncing around that kind of continuum, wondering where we are.
Well, that makes sense to me. It does. Yeah, like that we need someone else who we can bounce off, and they can give us some feedback, and we can be in that kind of dialogue with someone.
And what happens, I think, in a lot of relationships is we struggle to trust. Dan Hughes says blocked trust leads to blocked care. And so what we tend to do is when somebody, our resilience may not be so high. So when somebody pisses us off or upsets us, our what about me is so big, we kind of go, well, they're a nasty person, I'm not talking to them anymore. And we can just cut them if we kind of have that kind of extreme continuum, because we're so wounded we can't repair it. So being able to take some time and not respond. I've lost loads of friends by emailing when I should have just left it for a while till I'd calmed down. I'm much better at it these days, but occasionally I get it wrong and have to own up that I've tantrumed and go back and say, I'm sorry, that my what about me got a bit big there. Teaching, maybe there's a teaching element to teach clients that they can check it out and actually it's kind of, well, I don't want to upset that person. Well, that person's at risk of losing a friend because that person has pissed somebody off and they don't know about it and they can't repair it. Yeah.
And like that's the bit that can leave us in that place where we're still bouncing around, because no one will come and kind of be that firm edge to just push against and get to know ourselves a bit. And
David Rico writes about the 5 things that we can't change that if we accept bring us happiness, and one of them is that things end, and the other one is that people will let us down. We have all these posters that say, let's toss negative people out of our life, and if they're not kind to you, get rid of them. I really don't think it's that clear cut. I really think if I only kept the positive people in my life, I wouldn't have any friends at all, because we're all human and we all get it wrong. So it's about navigating that kind of playing field and saying, actually, when you did that, I was upset by it, and being brave enough to have. That's where things, I think, go really wrong with us humans, is we don't ever, maybe sometimes we don't reach that level of depth of honesty in relationships to feel nurtured and looked after, because it's kept at a surface level. And actually, if you're in that pretending game of, well, I turn up and I pretend everything's all right, but I'm really pissed off about what you did last week, that's not very authentic and that's not very real. And actually, what we tend to do is take it somewhere else and bitch about somebody else.
Of course we
And,
do. Yeah.
and it might come back to that person, so they hear about it secondhand, which is kind of game over. I teach this a lot in playgrounds with kids. I kind of say, well, sometimes people do say things that you weren't meant to hear. And so somebody unhelpfully brought it to you. So yeah, they were pissed off with you. Now you have a choice. You can either bitch that they're pissed off with you, or you can go and ask them why and see if you can put it right. You have a choice. Yeah. You have a choice. Yeah.
Mel, we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left.
I know. I made loads of notes. I don't even think I've looked them, and I'm not sure my chat room's working because I'm not seeing it scrolling. So I don't know whether it got stuck. And if somebody's been screaming questions at me, I hardly looked at it. So I'm really sorry.
I think you're okay. I think the group has just been kind of being with us, I guess, and listening, and which is great. Yeah. Well, Mel, I think it's been great to have you here at the end of our Working with Couples conference. I think it's tied some things up for us. We've been able to look at intimacy and the attachment, and it's been great to have a think about the systemic theory as well.
Yeah.
And the kind of how the helpful light that can shine on. The work for us too.
Yeah, and some of the terms like shame landmines and what about me is just my kind of quirky labels for stuff that I kind of own from my history that I see playing out in other people's worlds. I think we've all got it. We're all very unique, but I think we're all very much the same sometimes as well.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I think that those descriptions are very visual, and I think can help us go, that's what happens in my relationship. Maybe I can watch out for that sometimes.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we don't use ourselves enough.
Yeah. We're such a rich resource for our work, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. It's not all about us, because that would be our what about me is kind of, we'd be using our clients for therapy, but I think it's okay to own some of our struggles, because actually it makes our clients feel less alone, and that, we're human too. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think then we can have reasonable expectations for our clients.
Yeah. Oh, my chat room's just burst. Somebody said they like the what about me. Yeah, I think we've all got a what about me. Sometimes it screams really loudly and it needs attending to. Yeah. Or if we don't attend to it, it gets very, very big.
Yes. Yeah. And I really love that idea that then we can't hear someone else. It makes sense of that.
Desperate, when our what about me gets really desperate, that's when we resort to desperate measures. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow, loads to think about and to take away. Really appreciate, Mel, that you're come spend this hour with us after a very full practice day.
Yeah, thank you. I like to. I was a bit nervous because I normally talk about working with children and couples as a much later addition to my practice, but I'm hoping it was okay.
Yeah, it feels really useful and a great way to bring the conference to an end. And
thank you.
To do that thinking, to hear about your practice and your experience and how you use yourself, Mel. I've really appreciated that. Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you. I'll if there's anybody got any questions that I didn't answer that are burning, drop them in the chat room. I'm around for a few more minutes, so I can answer them if anybody wants that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great. And we've got the title of that book, What Makes Us Flip. So maybe
I'll email it over to Sandra because I think it's called What Makes Us Flip, but I may have it quite. I'm going from memory rather than having it here, so I'll send it over. Because it's quite interesting. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic, Mel. That's great. Well, I can see in the chat room Nadia saying I would love to hear you again. So I hope.
Thank you, Nadia. That's really nice to know. I'm always a bit. I'm aware it's. That I think we need to be honest about how we work and what works, but it's also quite exposing, and actually you're putting your own practice on the line can be quite anxiety provoking, and maybe we're putting our vulnerability out there. But hey, I'm supposed to be doing a doctorate about this stuff, so I got to practice.
Yes. Well, it's great to be doing some of that practice with you, Mel. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, thanks for being here with us, Mel, as part of the conference day. Thank you, everyone who's
And
been
thank you, everyone, for
live
logging
with us.
in.
Yeah,
Any questions, drop me a tweet or an email.
fantastic. Great. Well, to the next time we can tempt you back. Well,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
I'm a bit addicted now. I think it kind of makes me anxious and a bit nervous, but I think there's a little bit of a drama queen in me that quite likes the audience. So, yeah.
quite enjoy. Great, great. And thanks to everyone who's been part of the conference day today, all the other
Yeah, I've got a lot of
presenters.
catching up to do now. I'm exhausted
Yes,
a
I
bit.
know. We've had a whole day here. It's been great to be in it with colleagues from all over the world. We really appreciate that. And
Bought some headphones. It's my new pastime for train journeys is catching up on the talks.
oh, that's great. That's great to hear, Mel. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, Sandra and I will say goodbye for now
Yeah,
for this day, and we'll look forward to the next time we can get to work with you, Mel.
thank you.
Yeah.
Go and have a well-earned rest, John. You've been at it all day.
Thank you.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Bye for
Bye.
now.